Hello, folks, and welcome back to another edition of Rich Conversations, a series of short and insightful one-to-ones between myself, Rich, and somebody in my network who I see as being an absolute expert in their field. And I am, as always, absolutely delighted to welcome today Wali Rahman. Wali, it's really good to see you. How are you doing?
Hi, Rich. I'm great, thanks. How are you, okay?
I'm very well, thanks. I'm very well. Thank you so much for joining us. There's a range of topics we could throw ourselves in for today's edition, but one I really want to focus on, Wali, is equality, diversity and inclusion. There are many organisations out there who feel they're probably doing enough. There'll be some who haven't even given it a second thought. This is a massive question for a really short interview. What can all organisations do to improve in this area, would you say?
Well, I think the first thing all organizations need to do with regards to equality, diversity, and inclusion is to take a good look in the mirror, first of all. Have a look at their organization, see how diverse they are and how inclusive is the culture within that organization. And when I talk about diversity, obviously there are different types of diversity. There's demographic diversity and there's cognitive diversity. When it comes to demographic diversity, it's quite easy to see from anyone who knows an organization really how diverse that organization is. But also you have the workforce statistics you can look at, so you can see how many people from ethnic minorities you have, how many women you have, how many people who have declared their sexual orientation to be from an LGBTQ plus background, how many employees with disabilities you have, and so on. But it's also important not just to have the numbers, but also have the representation at all levels of the organization, and especially at the more senior levels. Then when it comes to seeing how inclusive the organization is, they need to be able to gauge that from staff surveys, from anecdotal feedback from staff, from the staff networks, also through exit interviews. But also they need to see and be honest with themselves as to how seriously they take all of that data, especially the qualitative data, whether they are acting on it, especially when it comes to things like exit interviews and feedback from the staff networks and so on. I would also say that another thing they can do is see, if they have staff networks for underrepresented groups. Also, if staff from those underrepresented groups are accessing all of the training and development, especially the leadership and management programs. Also, in terms of recruitment, they can make sure that they are using inclusive recruitment practices, such as blind recruitment is a good example that's used a lot in the civil service, when it comes to shortlisting, especially when it comes to interviewing and panels, making sure that panels are diverse if possible, but also making sure that where that's not possible, having sort of independent interviewers as well from across the organization. And another thing that probably I'll just mention is making sure they have initiatives such as reverse mentoring and sponsorship. So sponsoring employees from underrepresented groups as well. So I think all of those things would be really useful, but I guess overall it's about really taking an honest look at what they are doing and whether that's really working, and making sure that they are using a consultative approach in that, bringing together and hearing the voices of all those underrepresented staff. But also the last thing I will mention is that inclusion should be about everyone in the organization, and not just people from underrepresented groups, but making sure that everyone's voice is heard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Really insightful, Wally. Thank you. My next question for you, I suppose, before we wrap up this one today, is your current role with Forestry Commission. You have the job title of Diversity and Wellbeing Manager. And I've never seen those two words brought together in a job title before. What's exciting and special about that, I suppose?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, actually, because I also had never, until I applied for the job and got it, I'd never come across diversity and wellbeing badged together. And it's been really interesting for me, and I've realized how that's how it should be, because there are so many overlaps when it comes to diversity and well-being. A typical example is, when we're focusing on, I look after sort of the diversity aspects of the work, whereas I have also a well-being advisor in my team who does the well-being aspects mainly, but there are times when we work together. And a typical example would be things like men's health, awareness, or women's health awareness, menopause, things like that, where there's a clear crossover and overlap between sort of the two topics. And I think, it's really good that that's there, because then we can, maximize our resources and get best use of, all of our resources. For example, we have inclusion ambassadors. We've got about 44 of those within the organization, but we also have around 140 mental health first aiders and around 40 wellbeing ambassadors. So they all kind of work together. And of course, there are elements of diversity and inclusion, especially when you're in a sort of support role, such as the ambassadors, that they need to be aware of. For example, if they're talking about mental health, they also need to be aware of the impact of mental health on people from ethnic minority groups, for example, women, and so on. So it's a real, I guess it's a harmonious sort of working relationship between the two areas.
I love the idea of those ambassadors. It really makes it almost offers us a sustainable solution to the problems we find, don't we? If we're looking after each other as a workforce, that can be such a powerful thing. Yeah, it's a lot of food for thought there for people watching who might be thinking, how do we try and crack the problem? Ambassadors, I think that's really powerful. Yeah. Well, listen, Wally, we're done. We're done. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. It's really useful to bring in experts like yourself to have a quick chat. So thanks ever so much again.
Thanks for having me, Rich.
Pleasure. And that's it for this one, folks. I look forward to seeing you next time for another rich conversation. See you soon.